Good morning. This is ChamberLive, a new format we've developed as a result of the current business environment we find ourselves in. We hope to inform you and provide you the excellent programming we have in the past through this exceptional medium. Please bear with us as we have to streamline our video and audio concepts to deliver as high a quality as we possibly can. We are experiencing a bit of an issue with the sound, but we hope this works for you now. Well, we're in unprecedented times. There's no doubt about that. I think from my perspective, it's important that we have the ability to deliver up-to-date, relevant information for you, the business owner. So I brought in two chamber member guests. They're chamber member extraordinaires. They help the chamber muddle through its obligations, both financial and legal. And so I want to introduce you to, on my right and on your left is Meagan Swan.
Hello.
Partner with Pavey Law, and she is an expert in employment law and also litigation. So she's going to give us some information in a few minutes talking about how you deal with employees and some of those issues. And on my left and on your right is Nathan Graham. And Nathan is an old new member of the community. Graham Mathew has repatriated him from the west, from Calgary. So Nathan, welcome back to Cambridge.
Thank you.
And welcome here to help us navigate through these financial woes that we're going to be seeing. There's no question about that. So maybe first of all, Meagan, maybe let everybody know, just in case they're worried about, should I phone my lawyer or should I not? How busy is the law firm at this point?
Employment law is quite busy right now. On Monday, I woke up to probably about 7 emails in my inbox from employers, employer clients, saying to me that, what can I do? A lot of them were preparing for a complete closure if that hadn't already happened for them. And they needed to figure out what they can do with their employees and the payroll, because payroll is oftentimes the largest expense, a huge expense for an employer. And when they aren't able to operate, that doesn't stop. The payroll doesn't stop. So I've had many emails every single day since about a week ago saying, what can I do?
So, I think one of those was from me.
Yes.
Yes. And inviting you here to sit down and keep our members updated, because I think it's really important. We can utilize this mechanism. We can practice safe social distancing. We're not really close here. And we're in a sanitized studio here at the Chamber, so not keeping too many people around, and I think that's really important. Nathan, you just came back. Welcome back to Cambridge.
Thank you.
What a great time to come back.
Excited to be back.
And there's lots of businesses that are going to need your help and your expertise. How are you finding things integrating back in? But not only that, with this whole issue happening, how it must be crazy.
Yeah, and I think the big issue now is a lot of our clients have paper documents, right? And we're trying to push everyone to a more PDF environment, electronic documents, and like currently, if clients still want to drop off paper documents, we're quarantining the documents at our front door for 48 hours before we actually open anything. But right now, I think a lot of our clients are trying to reintroduce themselves with how do I deliver what my accountants need to do our audit, review, tax return digitally, so that we can meet our deadlines this year.
So speaking of that, we've just had some announcements. We get announcements, I think, this morning. We're going to have an announcement at 11 o'clock. We have no idea what that's going to be, but we will update you when we can. Nathan, right now, there is some relief for individuals. Maybe you can talk about the tax filing relief and that kind of thing as well.
Yes, so yesterday, Mr. Trudeau, or Prime Minister Trudeau, introduced 2 things which we thought were coming, and it's good to see that they came. They pushed out the personal income tax filing deadline, which is traditionally April 30th. They pushed it out a month, so you don't have to file your tax return until June 1st. For our clients, we're still suggesting treat it as an April 30th deadline.
Yeah, sure.
Because if you still have a refund, they still got to pay it. And if you owe tax, that leads me to the second thing they introduced. Generally, if you have a tax balance owing on your personal tax return,
it's due the day of.
It's due April 30th.
Yeah.
So they've pushed that out several months further down the road, so you don't owe it till September 1st.
Yeah.
So we're suggesting if you have all your tax documents, get them into us. We'll get your T1 prepared. And if you owe tax, well, you don't have to pay it till September 1st. So there's a large distance there that you can save your cash. And the other little tidbit they put in there is if you have personal tax installments that are due
Yeah.
from the period of yesterday's announcement to August 31st, you also don't have to make installment payments until September 1st as well.
Oh, well, that's good news. Meagan, what can employers who have no choice but to close the doors and maybe have to do layoffs? I know there was an announcement the other day, a large restaurant chain in the area had to lay off 1,000 employees. They have no choice. They can't keep those individuals. What can they tell their employees the government is going to do for them?
Well, when I speak to an employer, my advice to them is to look at this not completely as a temporary situation, depending on how long this can play out, right? Because we may see this being a longer closure than we expected, and then also longer business impacts going forward as well. So although they might be able to get back up and running in, say, a month, I think they're going to feel some economic hardship after that as well. So the very first thing...
And there's rules around it. There's a temporary layoff is only good for...
So a temporary layoff is... So when we talk about temporary layoff, the employee is still an employee. They're not dismissed, but they are. But what happens on a temporary layoff is that they're earning less than 50% of their income. So once that happens, an employer has to issue a record of employment to them, and they can then go and seek EI benefits if they qualify. So that's another issue, right? So when we and it's a temporary nature. And so if it's temporary nature, an employer can lay off someone up to 13 weeks in a consecutive 20-week period, and the employee can go and seek EI benefits. Currently, the government, and everything changes, day by day, right?
At least this was today,
Yes,
right now.
Right. Currently, the government has not waived the 1-week waiting period for EI benefits. So if an employer does put them on a temporary layoff, not a dismissal, the employee can then go if they have qualifying hours. And in this region, that's 700 hours within the last 52 weeks period, or within the last time that employee has made a claim. So it would be kind of employers to take a look to see whether or not, before putting that employee on a temporary layoff, whether or not they will qualify. The second thing is that so that's the first step, and that is the step that most of my employer clients are initially taking. However, a temporary layoff can extend to a 35-week period within a 52-week consecutive period if the employer chooses to continue to offer the employee and pay the employee's group insurance benefits.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so right now, a lot of my employer clients, or the notice that I will help them draft to give to their employees, it'll say that the employer will continue their benefits. So it indicates to the employee that hopefully this is temporary in nature, will continue your benefits. So if you get sick, you're able to still have those. And then the employer will then have to update that employee if we're getting close to that 13-week period that, you know what, sorry, we need to extend it. However, if you're unable, if you're within that 13-week period because you don't have group benefits in order to allow you to extend to the length of your period, if you're unable to return the worker to a job within that period of time, it is deemed to be a dismissal. And so at that time, the employer must pay the minimum termination pay that under the Employment Standards Act. However, we still have this issue about if you do not have all of your employees on an employment agreement that limits them just to the Employment Standards Act minimums, they can seek common law reasonable notice. And that common law reasonable notice is typically much longer than what the Employment Standards Act provides. So when we're talking about the layoffs, I'm also talking to my clients about, realistically, will you be able to return your employees to work? And if in that case they think, well, you know what, maybe this could lead to a permanent dismissal, if they're still operating today, we need to start thinking about whether or not you put your employee on working notice. So you start to at least get the benefit of work, but the employee gets the notice. And so you're trying to mitigate the eventual potential loss of having to pay the employee the notice. So this advice comes as counsel to an employer. It's not advice that an employee would want to hear because it's going to be tough
Yeah.
for a lot of employees.
It's exactly why if you own a business, you need to get in touch with an employment law lawyer. You need to have those facts and that information because you need to avoid as many problems as you can down the road. And so give Meagan a call.
Thanks, Greg.
I'm sure you appreciate
I'm heading
that.
back to the office.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've
very
got,
soon you'll be there. And it's Swan at PaveyLaw.com?
It is, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you can send her an email, and actually she's got her device here somewhere, so she can answer you right away.
Real time.
But, so Nathan, what about company? What about small businesses? You know, CFIB came out with a report, a survey that they did. And they surveyed small businesses from coast to coast to coast. We know how CFIB works. 25%, a quarter of those that were surveyed in the small business category said they can't survive any more than a month. What is the government doing right now to help those small employers that are trying to make sure that they do have something for their employees to come back to?
Right.
Yeah. So from what I've seen so far, and again, this is very fluid, and I think there's going to be a lot more introduced maybe today, maybe tomorrow. The two things I've seen so far is your corporate income taxes and corporate income tax installments that you might have to be making. Anything that's become payable as of yesterday's announcement to August 31st, kind of similar to what we just touched on the personal tax side. If you owe any corporate income tax balances in that period, it's deferred till September 1st. So what they're trying to do is free up working capital, so you're not making all these payments to the government for your corporate income taxes. Free up working capital to hopefully you can keep staff on longer than you think, or it helps you at least pay your staff, your payables, whatever you need to do to keep the lights on. The second thing they did, and this was another announcement yesterday, and I'm not going to lie, there's not a ton of details on it yet, but they've introduced a wage subsidy that eligible small businesses can take advantage of. And the wage subsidy is as follows. Don't get too confused. But basically, they are going to subsidize 10% of an employer's payroll for the next 3-month period. But don't get too excited as well, because there is maximums on it, and depending on how big your company is, you might burn through it pretty quick. The maximum on it is the government will subsidize up to $25,000 per employer, or $1,375 per employee. So we have some companies and some clients that they might burn up that 25 grand in a pay run, and some others it might take a month or two. So it just depends on how big you are. But at the end of the day, it's a subsidy and it's free money. So it's hard to complain.
We were talking before we sat down today, and that amount of money, if you break it down per employee, if they so it's $1,375 per employee for a period of 3 months. If you break that down, what it means by per month, and then per hour. Really, what the savings is a $2.85 savings per hour, right? That's not a lot of money, right? And so, although it will help a bit, it's going to be for probably for employers that have more of a minimum wage type of situation in order to keep them going. Which
do you think then, Meagan, there's going to have to be, you know, from your experience dealing with the ESA, the Employment Standards Act, do you think that the provincial government's going to have to come out and start? I know they have amended a few of the aspects of it now. You can't, I think it is, you can't be terminated because you're staying home caring for someone or whatever the case. You can get into those details, but are they going to have to make more changes to the ESA?
So I'm kind of concerned about the new guideline where the Ford government has come out and said that there will be job protection for people who have to isolate or who have been in quarantine.
Right.
Okay. So, however, employers also are going to be in a situation that they're not terminating as a result or not laying off as a result of the isolation. They're laying off as a result of payroll concerns, right? So we don't know what this legislation is going to look like about this job protection, because if they mandate that, say, if you have, say, 10 of your employees in self-isolation because they've traveled abroad and are now required to self-isolate, does that mean that you can't then put them on a layoff?
Yeah.
Which that's, I'm sorry, but a lot of employers, especially if there's a complete closure, they will have to do a temporary layoff. The other concern that's in the back of employment lawyers' minds is that whenever an employer materially changes a term of an employee's contract, right? So I hire you, you're on a full-time basis, you get X amount of money every week. If I say, Nathan, you are no longer going to work, or I've had to put you on a layoff, we have materially changed his terms of his contract. And so in employment law, that means that you've constructively dismissed someone, right? So an employee can say, you know what, I don't accept this temporary layoff, I am going to deem this to be a dismissal. So if your employment contract does not specifically provide that an employer can put someone on temporary layoff, that employee can make a decision to say, okay, fine, dismiss me and pay me my notice. And that notice, again, can be either the ESA notice, if your contract provides a limit on that, or it could be the common law notice. Now, we all have to kind of take a deep breath.
Wow.
We got to take a deep breath because
I'm telling you, you got to phone Meagan if you've got some situations like
we have
this.
to take a bit of a deep breath because I've been saying to a lot of my clients, do you think your employee within this global situation is going to say, I'm deeming myself dismissed? Because will that employee actually be able to go and find another job at this time, right? Right?
Like you wouldn't want to be unemployed right now. Even as a lawyer, you might not want to be unemployed right now.
No, you don't want to be unemployed. So, but there's a risk to your employees saying, okay, I'm deeming this as a dismissal and pay me out. And it's going to be those for employers, it's going to be looking at your long-term employees and whether or not, even before this happened, whether or not they were happy. If they're not happy, they're going to take this opportunity to seek their common law notice, which is going to be a huge impact on the payroll when business is already slowing down. Right.
Nathan, the government announced, Trudeau announced yesterday $82 billion in, somebody said to me, it's stimulus. I said, this isn't stimulus, man. This is like Band-Aid money, right? This is to cauterize the wound, hopefully. There's going to have to be stimulus coming down the road. I think his budget was going to suggest a $20 billion deficit to begin with.
Oh, yikes.
So now we're going to be looking at a $100 billion deficit. Where's this end, and how does it end for us?
Yeah.
I think, I heard something good on the news yesterday, and I don't quite remember, I apologize who it was, but they almost picture the economy as a three-legged stool, and if one of the legs goes, the whole economy collapses. One of the legs was government, which you just described. The second leg, surprisingly or not, and coming from the West, was the oil and gas sector, because it is one of our biggest, if not the biggest export Canada has currently to the world. And the third leg was like the healthcare system in this picture of a stool. So I think the underlying theme of this stool was the government needs to spend its money to initiate the economy, to give people money to start transacting together. The healthcare system needs to be there in times like this to help, the general public deal with this battle. So I'm glad I'm not the chief economist for Canada, to be honest, at this point, because I think they need to somehow get the world transacting again, get Canada working together, because what's going to happen in times like this is companies are going to start hoarding all their cash, right? Not paying their payables, trying to pay their employees like we've been talking about. But then on the flip side, someone has a receivable to that payable, they're not getting paid, they're hoarding their cash, and on it goes. It's like a domino effect, right? So if the government can spend prudently in the areas where I think it will generate the economy, like give it a kickstart again, that's where they need to target, and thank goodness I'm not the chief economist. That's the key piece.
Meagan, we were in unprecedented times with respects to hiring people. We were lacking skilled trades, where you could have put an ad in the paper for a frontline customer service rep and you would not be able to get anybody that maybe you wanted. You might get lots of people applying, but they might be way overqualified, and you're going to lose them as soon as they can find a job in their career. So the problem really was we didn't have enough people. we were probably at full unemployment, more or less, given the statistical data. Now, who knows where this is going to go? But employers know that once we get through this and everybody gets back to work, we're going to be in the exact same position. So it's now maybe really critical for employers to start thinking about, how do I keep those key employees? Because I need those key employees to come back when this starts going again.
Yes, you know, I think every business right now is evaluating their needs and their employees and how to make the best decisions in order to keep the best people. You know, I know that's happening. I'm talking to people daily about that. So the other way, you know, an employer can look at this is saying, okay, let's think about creative ways in order to minimize the risk to the employees and minimize the risk to the employer. And one thing that an employer could do is say, okay, can we talk about reducing you to part-time hours, right? So part-time hours, as long as they're making at least 50% of their regular wages, it's not a temporary layoff. It is a constructive dismissal.
Yes.
But if the employee agrees to that change, then you're fine. And I think it's going to be important for employers to have those open, honest discussions with their employees and say, you know what, we're in a critical period. We want to see this through with you. Can we come up with a way where you work, you know, 51% of the time? And you know what, a lot of people, a lot of employees are wanting that flexibility too, because their partner may not be they've got children at home, right? Their partner still works. They need to have the flexibility in order to be at home with their family. And so I think we're going to have to have difficult but open conversations about, do we put this employee on part-time hours and we can continue at least to pay them more than what they would earn on EI, typically, depending upon the salary range. But at least have them feel like you're trying your best to do something for them.
What about helping them navigate all of the benefits that are out there? Because, you know, we hope everybody listens to the announcements and understands what's going on. But there's, you know, you can approach your bank and say, look, I can't make my mortgage payment for 3 months. What about employers getting involved in helping their employees try and find these routes that'll help them get through this time?
I think that's always like the best solution. It's just whether or not the employer has the capacity, right? We're also dealing with just operational issues, right? And I know even for our office, we needed to be able to, in a quick period of time, be able to transfer all of our employees over in order to work remotely, right? And whether or not that remote work will continue to be there, right? The actual ability to work remotely. You know, it's a lot of people say, well, you know, work remotely, work from home. Well, how much actually can you do from home? Right? So,
and a lot of companies can't work from home.
Well,
a lot of industries, right?
Even from that study the CFIB said, 42% of respondents said they will have zero revenue if they can't, if face-to-face meetings are done.
Right.
Can you imagine that? 42% of employers in this country are saying, if I can't do face-to-face meetings, I am going to have zero revenue. Like, so.
And then that impacts the 100%, right? It's not
well, of course
it does.
Of course it does.
That'll domino.
So we can't sit back and say, and that's some of the concern. I get employers calling me and saying, Greg, you know what, I could probably do, you know, my office is self-contained. There's only 10 of us in here or 8 of us in here. You know, I can keep the place clean. I can lock the door and not let people come in, maybe on special visits. It's similar to the way a lot of businesses are operating. But I could have my employees work from home. But I don't want that to be the norm.
Or you can't sustain it. You can't sustain it. You know, and I think businesses are generally already experiencing a downturn in the amount of work that's coming in, or the amount of need, and that's just the reality. If the work's slowing down, you also have to then evaluate all of your expenses and payroll.
Yeah, really, really, really important. Anything else from a business perspective, Nathan, that like, you know, we can there are options. BDC, I think, has some.
Yeah, the
You know-
BDC, it was announced, I think this was last Friday, was it $20 billion?
Yeah.
In loans to small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So if you check the BDC website, I think there's some applications on there. You just go to the top.
And the
there's like
interest
a
rate
COVID
was
Oof.
like
Stumped
really
me.
low.
I think it's
Really,
low.
really low.
I can't remember what it was.
I think the concern, though, is, and both of you can kind of weigh in on this, but the concern really would be, even if they come to you and say, well, Meagan, I'm going to take a $100,000 loan. Well, you got to pay that loan back.
Well, yeah, it's right. You need to get some revenue in order to
Right.
pay it
Yeah,
back. And how do
yeah.
you do that?
And I don't think a lot of the details on a lot of these packages are even out there yet,
No.
to be honest. So these loans, like I haven't seen yet like what the payment terms are, if there's any interest holidays or what have you. So I'm not 100% on a lot of things.
Well, and you have a lot of concerns about that, even when they say, and I don't know whether this pertains to business. You maybe can, but you can get that hiatus on paying your mortgage. I don't know, does it pertain to business or not?
I don't know about that, but I have heard that, 6 months.
Yeah.
That all the big banks came together, and if you can't make your mortgage payments, I don't know the application process at this point.
Well, and
But
I guess I concern myself.
effectively-
I was on a call yesterday with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of us in the
Yeah.
chamber movement are starting to mobilize on our local governments and saying, there's a little bit of unfairness. Everything else is kind of applies to how much business you're doing, except property tax.
Right.
It's the perceived
Right.
ability to
Yes,
pay.
yes.
So you could be doing no business and you still have to pay the same level of
Right.
property tax. So there's some movement to try and get the provincial government involved with municipalities and figure that out, because I think that could be an important one. Now, that could hurt the local municipality, but
Right.
you know what? At the end of the day, everybody's gonna hurt here.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's
Oh, yeah.
gonna feel the pain.
Think about the people who have a lease payment. So the gyms.
Yeah.
Right? I have a client who operates gyms. They are a large scale gym, and they cannot operate their business. They've suspended the membership fees, so there's no cash flow.
Right.
But that landlord also wants to have the $30,000 per month.
April 1st.
How do you
Yeah.
pay that?
Yeah.
So
There's
it-
lots of things here. This
Yeah.
is so moving, and I think the federal government's going to have to try and grapple with that, because you can't. I really don't think, and I think they're wise enough to understand. We can't have the economy collapse around the small businesses in our community, that the gyms, the restaurants,
Right.
The retail shops.
retail
Retail,
shops.
everything.
We can't. I walked into a retail store the other day to get my lottery tickets, hoping I would win the lottery and then I could just go away from all of this. But,
Yeah.
but
We all hope
so
that.
I asked the gentleman behind the counter, the owner. I know him. That's where I buy my lottery tickets. And I said, so what are you doing with? He says, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We got to recognize
Yeah.
there are tons of small businesses out there that don't know what's going on. They don't know what, I'm sure they'll still open their door if the announcement is made that things got to shut down, because they're either not paying attention, they're not in the know, they don't care.
Right.
They're just grinding it out every single day, 15 and 16 hours trying to make a living. So,
Right.
I think this is going to be fluid, and we're going to need to call on you to regularly to come in and do these and update our members, because I think it's so important small businesses know that there are people in our community like you two and the Chamber of Commerce that's trying to help them navigate this. And so I guess in closing, I would just say, if you've got a problem, call Meagan Swan, because she solves legal problems
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
especially surrounding your employees. And that again is swan@paveylaw.com.
Thank you, Greg.
SWAN@paveylaw.com. And then Nathan, of course, Nathan Graham from Graham Mathew. He'd love to help you out
Yes.
because he's just fresh back into town. And is it
Yes.
is it
N Graham.
N
At
Graham?
GMPCA.com.
Yes, yes, yes. Say
If
that
you can
again.
remember that.
Say that again.
N Graham at GMPCA.com.
Yes. Give them a call because, or an email. Probably better with an email because at least that gives them time. Meagan usually gets her emails from me on Saturdays and Sundays. Not that she responds right away, but that's fine, Saturday or Sunday. Anyway, thank you both for coming in and helping us navigate through this, and we look forward to maybe having you back in very short order to say things are back to normal.
Yes.
That would be fantastic.
That would be-
I think
yeah,
we're all
that would
looking
be
forward
music.
to
I think we are too.
back to normal.
Well, that's Chamber Live for this morning. Check back again. We'll keep you updated as best we possibly can. Thank you.